folks, this is Pastor Mike coming to you from Studio 2012 with another Watchman video broadcast. I was looking at Drudge Report the other day. Let me show you what I was looking at. And I saw the headline there that was talking about the Muslim Brotherhood warning the United States of America. Now, I'm going to deal with that story in a little bit as a follow-up to something that we talked about last week concerning Iran and Israel and so on. But I had just happened to notice the article underneath that with the picture. You see the Chevron gas station sign, and it says, "Get ready for $5 gas." And I'm going, okay, yeah, they've talked about that for a while. $5 gas would be really hard for people to deal with here in this country, but I don't know that I see the prophetic nature of it. And then I looked at the picture again. And let me explain this before I show you the picture. I always wanted to be a magician. I stink at it, but I always wanted to be a magician. I wanted to be able to do some of the magic tricks that a lot of these people do. And I studied magic a little bit. And when I say magic, I don't mean like, you know, occult things. I'm talking about like prestidigitation. Prestidigitation is being able to use your hands and your fingers to perform like little tricks, illusions, as it were. And one of the key principles I know about doing magic and illusion or prestidigitation is that you get people to focus on something here while you're doing something else here in the background. I can take a little coin and I can make it disappear out of my hand, and it's all just a trick. I actually keep the coin in this hand. But people are looking at what I want them to look at instead of focusing what's in the background. So let's take a look at this again. Here's the Chevron gas station sign, and there is a building in the background. What building is this? I happen to recognize it. In fact, I've talked about it in one of our earlier videos. This is the Los Angeles City Hall. Now, I want you to think about this. Out of all the, I don't know, maybe 10,000 places that a photographer could have chose to take a picture of a gas station sign, this one in itself was chosen. This particular photograph, this particular angle was chosen because of, I think, because of what is in the background and what's behind it. Now, I don't automatically know the connection between rising gas prices and the New World Order, but I think that there is a connection, especially when you understand the nature of the symbolism of this particular building. As I mentioned earlier, it's the Los Angeles City Hall. There it is there, the Los Angeles City Hall. And I want you to notice that it looks like it has an unfinished pyramid on top of what looks like a Greek temple. Think Lincoln Memorial kind of Greek temple, because that's really what it represents. And the reason why I'm so familiar with this is that in St. Louis, at the St. Louis Civil Courts building, it was built around somewhere around in the 30s, and it's always had this peculiar design. I want you to notice the exact same design. It has a Greek temple with all these pillars, and then it has a step pyramid that goes up to the top. And on the top of the pyramid, I want you to get this. There's a box, a rectangular box, that has two griffins on the top. Now, griffins are, here we go, griffins are, they have the face of a human and the body of a lion. These, in fact, are cherubs. I want you to think of the Ark of the Covenant. I want you to think of what the Ark of the Covenant looked like. It was a box. It represented the throne of God, God's seat of authority, but also His mercy seat. And two cherubs had their wings going, and they were facing inward. In this particular case here, these two cherubs are facing away from the ark. One is facing east, and one is facing west. They represent opposites together. They represent these griffins are cherubs, which are spirits. So there definitely is a spiritual aspect to this. But if we break down this particular, the St. Louis Civil Courts building, you see the Royal Arch in the background. Okay, that's in St. Louis too, by the way. What you have is you have 32 columns that are surrounding a center section. That would equal 33. And then you have 13 levels going up the step pyramid with an ark and 2 griffins at the top. That same design shows up in the Masonic House of the Lodge Temple in Washington, D.C. Here's a picture of it. And in this case, you have 33 columns there that make the Greek temple. And you have the step pyramid on top that has 13 levels. Now, let me break this down for you very quickly. In fact, let's get Albert in on the scene. This is Fad Albert Pike and his book, Morals and Dogma. In fact, I remember several years ago, there was a news reporter in St. Louis that had a feature, like on weekends, you know, a filler story called What Is It? And he featured the St. Louis Civil Courts building and this peculiar design that they had on the top. And they interviewed people, and everybody said, well, we don't know exactly why it's built that way. It just is, and so on and so on and so on. And I was reading Albert Pike and Morals and Dogma, and he was actually talking about the mystical meaning behind the number 7. And he described it like this, and he actually referenced what these 2 buildings, or actually these 3 buildings, the House of the Lodge Temple, the St. Louis Civil Courts building, the City Hall in Los Angeles. And if you start looking, you'll notice that in practically every American skyline in these major cities, there's always a building with like an unfinished pyramid at the top of it. In most cities, I mean, this is like the new thing propping up. And so he actually described, these were modeled after the temple or the mausoleum of Halicarnassus. This guy, some king, buried himself and his wife there because he thought they were going to be resurrected. He thought building it this way would be a sure sign that he was going to be resurrected from the dead. Well, I can tell you there is going to be a resurrection of this guy and his wife and all the people that followed him. At the end of time, God is going to resurrect them to be judged and thrown into the lake of fire. But anyway, so Albert Pike was talking about that in relation to the number 7. And so he was talking very simply. He said the Greek temple on the bottom represents a square. It has 4 sides on it. The pyramid or triangle on top of that represents a triangle or the number 3. It has 3 sides. So you have 3 added to 4, which makes 7. And when we think of the number 7, we think of like the 7 rungs of the Masonic ladder, the 7 levels of the Mithraic rites. That goes back to all the mystery ideas that said in order to achieve godhood, you have to go through these 7 levels. Think of Ed Young doing sexual practices for 7 nights to get this great thing in your marriage. It's all about ritualism. But this number 7 actually refers to the 7 heads that are on the beast of Revelation chapter 13. John said, I saw the beast rising up out of the sea, and he had 7 heads. Those 7 heads represent the spirits of Antichrist. They're the exact opposite of the 7 spirits of God. If you want to do more study in that, that's Isaiah chapter 11 and Revelation chapter 13. So they're the exact opposites. But this 7 has a mystical idea. And here's how Albert Pike, I better put Albert over here away from the Bible because they shouldn't be around each other. And so anyway, the actual idea is that the triangle on top represents the heavens. The square on bottom represents the earth. So he says the triangle represents the male principle, the square represents the female principle, and they're joined together to create the new man, the new temple, the God man is what that represents. And let's go back to this image of the Masonic House of the Lodge Temple, Washington, D.C. You have 33 columns, and then you have 13 rows on top of that. If you add those two, by the way, there are 33 levels in Scottish Rite Masonry, and there are 13 levels in York Rite Masonry. When those two are combined together, 33 plus 13 is 46. It's the exact number of chromosomes where our DNA is stored. It literally is about rebuilding the temple of the human body, bringing mankind to godhood. And so we go back to this article here, this little story with this little picture on it, get ready for $5 gas. It sort of indicates to me what spirit is behind what's going on in this world. You always look what's behind what's going on to get an image of it. Now, getting to this story of the Muslim Brotherhood. Here's the actual story that I was looking at. This is sort of a follow-up to some things that we have talked about. Why is it that we helped Egypt overthrow their president? Why is it that we helped Libya overthrow Muammar Gaddafi? Why is it that apparently it looks like we're going to get involved in Syria? Why is it that we're involved in all these things that are going on in the Middle East? Does that have anything to do with oil and gas prices? Yeah, I think it does. And so you remember, Egypt wants to overthrow their president. And we talked about this in our broadcast here a while back when all this was happening, that Hosni Mubarak, who was the president of Egypt, the sort of, I guess, the lifetime dictator of Egypt, he was soft on Islam. And there was something, let's go back to the days of Jimmy Carter, who helped Menachem Begin of Israel and Anwar Sadat. I remember this as a child, watching these two guys shake hands. A peace agreement existed between Egypt and Israel. They were no longer going to be at war with each other. Anyway, Egypt was going to respect Israel's borders. Israel was going to respect Egypt's borders. And that's where they were going to leave it. And so now we kick this guy out of Egypt. And a group called the Muslim Brotherhood is now going to gain control and is gaining control of Egypt. And so, and let me just explain this term. Do you know what a shakedown is? Okay, a shakedown. It's like a mafia term. It's like an organized crime term. It's what happens a lot of times in business. A lot of times business negotiations are actually based on what's called a shakedown. In other words, they hold something over your head so you can keep the money coming in. Well, this case here, there's a shakedown going on. Look at the article. Muslim Brotherhood warns U.S. aid cut may affect Egypt's peace treaty with Israel. A top Muslim Brotherhood official has warned that any cuts in U.S. aid to Egypt could affect Cairo's peace treaty with Israel, the latest sign that Egypt's emerging political forces intend to call Washington's bluff over the diplomatic dispute triggered by a crackdown on non-governmental organizations. And basically, this is just a shakedown. Okay, it's a bribe. You keep the money coming in, and we'll behave. Here's what the Muslim Brotherhood is telling the United States of America: if you dare cut any money that the American taxpayers, you and I, okay, we send our money into the federal government, and the federal government is sending it to Egypt and other countries all across the world. That's our money, okay? Sending it to Egypt. And is the typical nature of anybody that's hooked on government money. When the government threatens to take that money away from them, I mean, there's going to be a fight. And so the Muslim Brotherhood has simply said to the United States, if you cut off our money and you don't send us the cash, we're going to forget about this peace treaty with Israel. Remember what I said last week in last week's broadcast concerning Iran. Iran is heating it up with Israel. Now Egypt, and now Libya is going to get involved, and now Syria. Now all of these nations are going to be against Israel. Too bad for these nations. Okay? Yeah, there might be some things happening in Israel. In fact, I think there is, according to the Scriptures. But it won't turn out well for all of these nations that went against these still are God's people. No, most of them are not saved. Most of them are very wicked. But God made an unconditional promise to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob, and to his seed forever. And so, a couple of things. This is just a little political comment here that I'm making based upon what I know from the Scriptures. Number one, the United States had better not turn its back on Israel. Okay? We'd better be on the side of God's people. Why? Genesis chapter 12, God said, I will bless them that bless you, and I will curse them that curse you. That's plainly from the Scriptures. Let's switch stories. I've got something that I